Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show. As leaders, we want to build teams that share our desire to serve our customers, the what we do. And we also want the team to share our values, the how we do it. So on the employer side, we want to make sure that we're clear about the what and the how so that we have a good fit with our teammates. On the employee side, the job seeker, the candidate side, it's also important that you know what your values are so that you know that you're finding a company that's a good fit for you. My guest today is Ken Misiewicz, the president and CEO of Pleune Service Company. Ken has spent decades shaping the culture at Pluene and has been very intentional about hiring for fit, helping both his company and his current and potential employees find that right fit. Ken was one of the early guests on the Clarity Advisor Show. So welcome again, Ken Misiewicz.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, you're welcome. So remind us again what problem Pluene solves and who your customers are.
So Pleune Service Company is a mechanical contractor, and our focus is commercial industrial heating and cooling. So what we're doing is we're either keeping people comfortable in a commercial or industrial space, or we're keeping process running.
Okay, so keeping people comfortable sounds like HVAC type stuff?
It is HVAC, and it sounds impossible.
Well, yeah, because somebody wants it too cold and somebody wants it too hot, right?
And they're 2 feet from each other.
Yes. Okay. And then the processes running side of thing, what does that entail?
So for manufacturing, uptime is everything. And so whether it's boilers and chillers, we're actually behind the scenes, right? Helping with temperature control for whatever a manufacturer is doing. And that could be food product, that could be metal product. It could be hot, it could be cold, it could be frozen, it could be boiling. We work with a wide range of temperatures and applications. But in a manufacturing environment, downtime destroys their business. And so the intensity level is high. And that is where when we get into comfort cooling for people, it actually feels pretty lazy, right? Because about 72 degrees at about a relative humidity actually gets you in a comfortable space. With process, it's a different world.
Sure. Okay, so briefly bring us up to speed on how you got to Pluene and how long you've been there.
I've been at Pluene 29 years. Actually came in the field as a technician, worked my way up through the organization. The way I got here was actually by my wife telling me at my previous employer that you either need to find another job or find another wife. So she was really, really subtle about it. And kind of drove the point home in 1995 that fit does matter. And I was putting the need for insurance and a paycheck, right, for taking care of a family at the top. And she said, yeah, happiness matters too. And so that forced the search. And so when I found Pluene, I actually did not know anybody here. What I did was know that everybody that I had run into on a job site or in a wholesale house was a good person. You could just tell the vibe was different, the energy was different, the feel was different. And that's what really led me here.
Okay. And how big is the team now?
We're roughly 125 people. About 3/4 of that is field staff because that's what we do, right? Is installation, service, repair, maintenance, all those things. And then the internal staff is focused on scheduling and billing and sales activities, estimating, things like that.
Okay, so let's get into this conversation around fit and culture fit, both from the employer side and the employee side. So what is culture fit and why is it so important?
One of the things that we have found over the years, when I came to Pluene, we were focused on skill sets. We were focused on if you had an HVAC background, an aptitude, mechanical inclination, motivation to get work done, work in place, or repair work done, we would hire and throw it against the wall, see what sticks, right? There wasn't a clear strategy other than hire people that are competent in a space and then see how it works out. And I will say we had the best and we had the worst. right? Like we had people that were wonderfully skilled, but you could question their ethics, or were wonderfully skilled and they didn't know how to talk to other humans. Very good with machines, not good with people. And we had other people that were fantastic all the way around and everything in between. And so really a mixed bag of nuts. So what we did over the years was determined, and this is something that was a journey for me, because as a manager, you're looking at your employees and thinking, why won't this person do that? Or why aren't they interested in self-improvement? Or why is it that they would like more money or more respect or more time off, but they're not interested in how do I take care of a customer or how do I contribute to the whole? And what you end up realizing, or I did, was it's not them. Everybody's different. They have different motivations, different desires, different goals, right? Different passions. And what gets them moving, what gets them fired up, it has to be matched with the employer, the work the company does and the customers they serve. And if it doesn't, it's a mismatch. And so we were putting focus into hiring people of character, not even trying to overly define it at that point, right? We're just saying, hey, there's a standard here of ethical behavior, and treating people with respect, not just being good with equipment, machines, or numbers. And quickly realized that wasn't enough. The standard had to be, we had to add more definition, more depth to that. We had to work on the front end to help make sure that with incoming employees that there was a fit, because the organization is hiring people that have skill sets to solve a very specific problem in the moment, but then you have to live with that person and they have to live with you for the rest of the time you're working together. And so it really put us on a path of thinking long term, even though you're hiring in the moment.
Yeah, and we've talked about both me with other guests and you and I in other contexts about the importance of, as leaders, as employers, making sure we're bringing people in that fit that, and getting it defined is obviously the first step. And sometimes the more challenging step is really saying, what do we mean by that? But once you get that nailed down and you start looking for that, that makes all the difference for the employer. But why is it important for an employee to be thinking about fit and culture fit?
I would put it in facetiously. I would say, well, it's only your life. Like Zig Ziglar said, only floss the teeth you'd like to keep. I would say, if you really care about your quality of life, it's really good due diligence for a prospective employee, for them to be researching the company and them looking at any indication they can get of what's really happening inside that organization, not just what's on a website, right? Not just marketing literature or a sales pitch. Like, really, is this a fit for me? Because if it's not a fit, it will be a miserable experience, right? And the degree of mismatch, to me, proportionally, is the degree of miserable, right? Just like the degree of alignment is happy. I have seen people that have come to our company and said, I have opportunities to make more money, but I care so much more at this stage of my life about who I'm working with, who I'm working for, and that my work matters. That's completely different than having a conversation with somebody who's new to the workforce, doesn't even understand the concept of work yet, and they're not able to qualify what matters. They wouldn't even know what a fit is. And so I think at different stages of progression through someone's career, that becomes more clear for people most of the time. Although sometimes I think there's people that never figure it out. They chase money, or they chase ego, or they chase something else. And I'm not judging that. There's a place for that. There's other people that are looking for really, really strong indications of values that align with them as things that matter to them. Because you can't fake that. If your values don't align, you can fake on the outside, you can comply with the culture, but inside it's that dissonance, right? You never actually feel like you're part of the whole.
Right. And it's interesting that you said, I think I've experienced this as well, working with people that early on in career, sometimes you haven't really defined what's important to you, or you define it in a way that maybe changes over time. So how do you encourage job seekers, job candidates, potential employees how do you encourage them and work with them to help them at least define it for now. Know what you're looking for now. It might change over time, but at least get that figured out when that's not even a concept in most places. That's not something most people I talk with in their early 20s when they're starting their career, they've never even heard anybody say anything about, they know about company culture, but they've never thought of like, well, I have a culture and I have core values and I want to fit. No one's ever talked to them about that. So how do you help them think about that and then start defining their own core values so that they can see if their core values match a potential employer?
That's a really good point. And we find that early career with a number of people that they just don't know what they don't know. And so what we're doing is we try to frame things in a way where it's part of a career. And what's really nice about being an employee-owned company is that we can talk about the long-term and the short-term and try to connect the dots because we don't hire people just for the short-term. Every hire is meant to be for their career. And so it's an idea when we're having those preliminary discussions, not only framing it in a sense of what is the job that you would be coming into now, who would you be working with, what's the scope of work, what are the operating dynamics inside of the organization or with the customer on a job site, whatever that looks like relative to the role that they're seeking, but also that there's not just career opportunities, but it's all about the opportunities that might fit. And for some people, that isn't interesting. They're looking for a job in what they're seeking now. That sometimes actually prevents us from hiring them because yes, we need people to do the work, but we don't want people who are just thinking about next Friday's paycheck, right? We really want people that are thinking about the future, that they're themselves in the future. So the way that we put it in some of our preliminary conversations are, if 401k does not matter to an individual because they're not interested in their future well-being, their future financial self, then neither will ESOP. Right? If the future you doesn't matter for your investments, then the idea of an employee-owned company with shares in a company, it won't matter because those are so highly correlated. So when you're talking to somebody about coming into a job, you can really tend to see if they're asking questions just about the now, or if they're also thinking about, if I'm successful here, what do you do? Do you promote from within? Right? Do you hire from without? Those types of things. Also on the front side, Ken, we use a system called AccuMax for a personality profile, and we overlay their results with the role that they're applying for. And sometimes what we'll find is it's not a fit. And we'll run it against other job profiles because you can tell it's a good person, good character, motivation, like everything is showing green flag. But when you look at it, you're like, that's not the right fit for that job. So we have examples where someone applied for a service technician, the manager looks at it and says, gosh, this person's wired for sales. And we actually have that conversation openly and directly, even on the front end.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's almost the very definition of the first who, then what. Like we're looking for who we're hiring and then what they're going to do. Well, we can figure that out, or that might be different than what we thought. But step one is this the person that we want, the kind of person we're looking for from a values and like you said, the motivation and all those pieces. And then we'll slot them into the seat on the bus. But first, should they even be on the bus? So I'm curious because just again, in my experience, younger people haven't even been encouraged to think about things like their values and their future. You talk about, if they're not interested in a 401k, then an employee-owned ESOP company isn't going to be attractive and that might not be a fit. But sometimes they don't even know that those are things. Like you had said, they don't know what they don't know. So how do you approach that with people? Do you try to help them see that there's more to this than just the immediate job and the immediate paycheck? Or do you just assume that that's how they're wired and it's not going to work? Or what do you do with that when somebody maybe just doesn't know what they don't know?
We're actually pretty accustomed to having those conversations because when we're hiring for an apprentice type role, they typically don't know. And even then, it's not one size fits all because we have people that are coming into apprenticeships, which is really entry-level field work, right? Pipe fitting, welding, plumbing, other services. And the truth is they don't know. They know they're mechanically inclined. They know they like certain types or aspects of work, but they haven't experienced it themselves in a professional environment. So we'll talk through to the degree that we can. We'll do job shadows, if at all possible, right? To get someone exposed, like on the job, in the field, if we can do that. But what we do find is the average age of an apprentice is actually approaching 28 years. So what you have is a lot of people who have tried a number of things that didn't work, and they realize I need to do something that's economically viable, that gives me a career path, that can provide benefits to my family and a steady paycheck, and I like to do it. And in the trades, there's the idea that we're not going to live in homes and have buildings, right? As long as you have those, you will have trades. And so there's something there, even if there's highs and lows. And so what we try to do is we model out as much as we can what a job or career path looks like. We give them exposure if at all possible. We do fit test with tools if at all possible. But we still do have a failure rate, because if I tell you this is a hard job, I know you went to school for it, but this is a hard job physically. They say, yeah, I got it. And then they get out on the field for a couple of weeks and they're like, this is a hard job. Yes, absolutely. And so we do have a washout rate, and we just try to minimize that. And if it isn't a fit, we try to make sure that we off-ramp as quickly as possible for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, sometimes you just don't know until you get there what it is. And you can explain things like what it's going to feel like to ride a bike or do something that you've never done. And you can say, well, this is what it's going to be like. And like, okay, but until you do it, you can't really appreciate what it really is. So I can totally see, especially with some of the more demanding, physically demanding work that you've got, people might not really understand it till they go do it. So back to like personal core values, because we want to get to the place where individual core values align with the company core values, so that we've got a fit. That what I believe and how I like to work and how I behave, that's a fit with how we all work and how we all behave at the company. So when people come in not having thought about their own core values, how do you help them think about that and frame what's important? We talked about, well, think about your future and economic future and career path, but what other things do you think about, and how do you help people think about their own values so that they can see if there's a match?
So one nice thing about having clear values inside of an organization is it allows you to talk about those things. Our values were actually put out to the company by our ESOP committee years ago, and asked our employees to identify the company's core values from their perspective, what matters most. And Ken, I didn't even know there were that many value words in the English dictionary, right? And so it's like an unbelievable list. And so people went through and they identified their top 3, and then we bubbled those up. So when you get into integrity and customer orientation and education, teamwork, persistence, respect, these are things that our people bubbled up to the top. So what that does is it allows our people on the front end to have conversations, ask questions, even if we're not talking explicitly around the values. We're not putting our value statement in front of a prospective employee and saying, do you believe in these things, right? But you can build questions around them that dig into how they treat other people and how they think about customers and what integrity, what does honesty mean to you, those types of things. And then really use that as a filtering tool to complement some of the more formal tools. And one of the beautiful things about being a very diverse company, we don't care about age, right? Orientation, like any of the things. And I understand legal protections. That's not what we're talking about. We don't care. We're looking for great human beings, right? And they're wrapped in all kinds of different ways. And so we're looking for them to have the commonality of values, because that is the single biggest indicator of whether or not they are going to stay.
Yeah, and so for on the employee, job seeker, candidate side, it's important, I think, for them to realize that too. Like, one of the reasons, hey, you want to fit with the company that you're talking to, because that's going to make you happy. Like, this isn't just about the employer. Like, we're looking for these people so that we can have the right team. Well, those teammates want to be on the right team, and so to help educate those prospects, those candidates, to say, hey, listen, you want to get clear on what you're looking for so that you make sure you find it. Because if you don't, you'll be unhappy too. And while our company might not be a fit for you, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or we're a bad company. It just means you're not a good fit. But you want to find a good fit. So you want to pay attention to this. You want to dig into this. Are you able to, if somebody's not a good fit at Pluene, help them understand that, hey, don't lose the thread of this is a criteria for you to go find where you do fit?
We really do have open and honest conversations, right? So even on the front end, you're trying to get that. And that's beautiful because you're trying to find out, this is dating, right? Like, let's not put a ring on this finger. Let's figure out if this is right? Because it needs to be right for everybody or it's going to be wrong for everybody. And so on the front end, that's one thing. And then to your point, as an existing employee, well, you have your early years, right? Where you're figuring things out, you're developing, you're making connections, right? You're assimilating. You have mid-career, right? Where you've kind of mastered maybe core craft and are taking on new challenges and maybe even building relationships outside of the organization, right? We have people that are representing the organization. If they don't fit with the values, I don't want them representing the company and the public, right? So, and for them to be in the right role and get the satisfaction of doing a good job, it does need to align. If we find that people have changed or they're not who we thought they were, or for the employee, the company isn't what they thought it was, we just appreciate open, candid, honest conversations around, hey, this isn't working. What can we do to get a successful outcome? Because we're not looking to hurt or harm, right? And we wouldn't do all the push-ups of getting good people in, right? To then have to help them leave, right? That's expensive and painful for everybody involved.
Right. Yeah. That's where I was going to go next is what's the process for when you figure out or they figure out that this is no longer working, or maybe it was never working and they were just trying to hang on. When they came in, they thought it was something different. Now they realize it's not, and they're not a fit, or however you get there, whether it's early on or as things change, but you get to a place where it doesn't work. And so you have a candid conversation with them, and then what? Then how do you try to make that transition smooth?
Now, this area gets really gray. So we're a process-oriented organization, but we hit this one in multiple angles, multiple levels, and it's kind of like cheesecloth. Like some stuff gets through, other things get caught. So one of the first things is that 30 days in, no matter who you are, you're onboarding with me. And one of the things we are reviewing, like person to person, one-on-one, are the values, right? And so that we're talking about the people that hired you, the people that brought you in here, here's what they're looking for, right? And I reinforce the message. And I also let them know that if the conversation we're having doesn't resonate, like if this doesn't feel right, then it won't be right. And most of the time, that's not an issue. In fact, we get quite the opposite. They're like, no, that's actually why I'm here, right? Because you were able to clearly say, not just from a value perspective, but the company knows where it's going. It knows what customers it's seeking. It knows what the value proposition is. It understands how to operate in its market. And we appreciate the how and the who. And those are the people that you're just reinforcing in the onboarding process. 2 months after that, when they hit their 90 days, if they're green light, and so is their manager, then they get scheduled for round 2 of onboarding. Now they're meeting with other people to have these open-ended questions and one-on-one dialogues around roles, responsibilities, connections. But that's also their opportunity to talk about how do things really work? What are the real expectations? Because you can handbook people to death. That doesn't really drive behavior in a positive way. But when people say, no, actually around here, if you screw up, you own it. You say it out loud. You tell people, hey, I made a mistake, I need help, and you get help. Those are signals that are sent by their coworkers that cannot come from a manager, right? So they're reinforcing our values of teamwork and respect, things like that, without it ever actually having to be articulated in that way. Now, once they're past their 90 days, they get a formal review, 6 months formal review, 1 year formal review. And then part of the review process, the formal process, is actually consistency. Values is one of the things they're evaluated on, right? Because if they're doing something that's not consistent with it, one, I would pray that would have been addressed in the moment. But bigger picture, if it's an issue that needs to be noted, that would be formally addressed. What I would say, and here's where things get really, really gray, is that when we're having our candid conversations, that could be anybody at any time. That could be a peer, that could be a foreman, that could be a manager, that could be a salesperson who sees something that isn't lining up, and they can call it out, have a conversation, say, hey, Bob, what's going on here, right? Your behavior is not consistent. This isn't who I think you are. What's going on? And that could lead one place. It's not formal. It's not written. It's not documented, right? There's no discipline. But I think the best influence on people's behavior is actually their peers. And so if you're in a crew or you're with a group or you're in an office area where the majority of the people are clearly aligned on what matters and how we do it, you tend to assimilate and fit into that or bubble out quick, right? And we've seen people that are sent to crews out in the field where, Ken, they're fired without being fired. Because when a foreman says to a project manager, I don't want George back, he doesn't have the work ethic, or I couldn't trust him, pretty soon that person doesn't have a job site to go to. And the project manager looks at him and says, I'd really like to put you somewhere. I don't have anything. So that stuff happens without being clearly addressed, because it's not one of these like flagrant violated a principle type things. It's that on the job, they're not pulling their weight, they're not fitting, and the team around them kind of pushes them to the outside.
Oh, there's so much good stuff in there. I want to start from the finish there about the peer pressure, peer review, and being peer pressure in a positive way. Like, we're getting things on the table, and anybody can call anybody else out in a positive and encouraging way. But we're looking to fix things. It reminds me of the Seth Godin line about culture, that people like us do things like this. And when the team really owns that, hey, no, people like us do these things, and we see you not doing these things. And so we're going to say something about that because you're affecting what we're trying to get done here. And then the other line is, here, we do things this way. And so when people aren't doing things the way we do it here, it might be where you used to do it at your other place, but here we do it this way. And to have everybody owning that in a way that they're willing to step up and call out their peers, it's just so powerful. Because you're right, not only can the manager it comes better sometimes from peers than the manager, but the manager just can't be everywhere. You as the president and CEO don't see every interaction with every person everywhere every day. And so it's just not going to happen if it's all reliant on you. Well, Ken, you're the steward of the culture. You need to that's never going to happen. It's got to get down to that peer level. So I love that. I love the intentionality of your process too, that there's, at this point, there's this step, and at this point, there's this step. And the fact that every single person meets with you. So you literally you've met with all 150 people that have been hired on your watch. Is that accurate?
I do. Yes. I meet with every single person. And then we also offer follow-ups, right? Because sometimes after they get their onboarding book and they read a little bit deeper, they think a little bit more. Part of what we're trying to show them is we're a customer service organization, and we have internal customers, which are employees. We have external customers, which is who we serve, right? And on the outside. And so the idea here is if anyone follows up with any question, we follow up with answers. And part of that idea, Ken, is modeling, this is how we operate. It's open door policy, right? Text the president, get an answer. Like, it's meant to be that we're all employee owners and we have a common stake. Like this, we win together, we lose together.
Yeah, that's so good. And if in case the audience hasn't picked up on it, you're an ESOP company, an employee-owned company. And so everybody literally has an ownership stake in the business, now to varying degrees, of course, but that's powerful in itself that, hey, any disruption in the culture or the service levels to customers, well, hey, that has an impact on me because I'm an owner. And so that's a powerful force for good as well. I also got to just mention the handbook them to death. What a great line. And you see that so often that people are like, well, here's the handbook, read it, and you'll know all about us. And you'll know what you need to do and what you don't need to do. And that's just not right. That's just not how it's going to work. It's got to be person to person, and there's nuance to things. And what it says in the book and how we do it isn't always 100% aligned. And probably shouldn't be, because you can't capture everything that really happens in writing. And so, I just thought that was a funny line.
Well, when we talked about accountability, right? If you see something, say something. And that is so hard for people even managers, like if somebody in a different department, they're like, hey, do I say something? They're not mine. Like, do I, don't I? Gosh, yes. I mean, part of our mission statement talks about building an ethical and accountable working environment. Part of our mission statement talks about not settling for second place, second rate, but pushing each other to succeed. Well, what does a winning sports team do? To your point earlier, it's positive energy, right? The idea is we all want to win. But in an employee-owned company, we are 100% employee-owned. In an employee-owned company where if you have somebody who's sucking wind, they're dragging everybody down. So you either have to pick them up and help them, or they have to get off the field, right? And so you want that type of accountability. And what I would say is, what I just said sounds very negative, but we actually quite often have the opposite. We have people that are feeling a lot of stress, a lot of pressure because they're putting it on themselves because they don't want to let other people down. And that motivation right there, they show up and they really go the extra mile because they don't want to be the person who set the team back or held the team up or caused a failure that cost everybody. And mistakes happen, we all know it. But you can feel that difference when someone's trying really hard and makes an honest mistake versus I don't care.
Right. Yeah. And it's great that the team, we all have good radar for that. And so to have that accountability diversified out to everybody where people feel comfortable doing that. And in my experience, once you have an instance of somebody where they've got that, I'm not sure if I should call them out. They're not my person or they're not my department or it's maybe not my business, but then they do it anyway. And then the response is positive and it's reinforced as, yes, that's the behavior we're looking for. Yes, that's not only good, it's kind of mandatory. Like not just, yeah, please do. Like you have a responsibility to the team to call that out because we're all in this together. I found that once that happens once or twice, people, the pressure goes down and was like, oh, okay, that is really okay. I know they said it was okay, but I'd never seen that before. And once they see it, like, oh, okay, so it is okay. And we're not going to make a big deal about it. And we're just going to admit it and move on. And everybody's going to be better for it. And once you can establish, like, no kidding, this is really how we behave, it just becomes so much easier. And then again, self-reinforcing. The more people see that it works, the more they do it because it works.
And they do need to see it modeled. And that's where to do it the first time in fear of punishment, right, is so nerve-wracking for someone. But when they see that somebody else owns it and they see how they're treated with respect and, okay, yep, that happens. What are we going to do about it? And they see that it's just dealt with as a matter of course. Then I think it kind of makes it safe, right, for people to say something. The other part is because I do the onboarding or I'm part of the onboarding process with a larger team, it allows me to talk about my screw-ups, right? I come from the field. I did the work. I screwed things up, right? And so whether that was with a customer or an installation or repair, Ken, I've screwed up, right? And so being able to say, hey, here's what I did and here's how the company handled it, right? And how I'm appreciative for that because I was able to take that learning forward, right? And now I'm able to share that with other people so they don't make the same mistake. So when we have somebody make a mistake, it's if they need to go because they meant to, that's different. But if it's an honest, earnest, good faith mistake, I don't want to lose that person. I want to capture the learning, right? I want them to stay, right? I want them to carry the water future and saying, let me teach you what I've learned. And when you think about employees as they move through their career path, especially in a physical trade like ours, you need to create a path where people can use their experience and their knowledge, right, to help grow other people, right, while you still have that runway left to share.
Yeah. Oh, so good. Well, Ken, this has been a fantastic conversation. I so appreciate your time and just always good to tap into the wisdom and the practicality of the things that you've done. I found tackled culture and business operations with such intentionality. I know you're such a process thinker, but to be able to put that into place in a way that everybody, task-oriented people and people-oriented people, can really absorb and embrace. It's very inspiring. So I love hearing your story. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
Yeah, I'm curious who should be reaching out to you. And I guess I'm thinking specifically of people who have heard this now, like, that's where I want to work and are interested in maybe exploring opportunities with Pluene or would like to tap into your wisdom directly.
So my email address is KMISIEWICZ@plueneservice.com.
Okay. And we'll get that and your website link in the show notes. So again, thank you so much for being here, Ken. I really appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, Ken.
Oh, you're welcome. All right. And that brings us to the end of another Clarity Advisors show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you could be so kind as to leave a 5-star review on the platform you're listening or watching now, I would appreciate that. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisors show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.